Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Franchise Tag Overtime. I'm Gareth Smith, back from Radio Row, and after a little bit of a break, and we are back again with another very special guest. We are back this time with former Oakland Raiders. It feels weird saying Oakland Raiders at this point, having the last few years. Offensive tackle Lincoln Kennedy. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Garrett. How about yourself?
I'm very good. No, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me. Obviously, really good to speak to yourself. A hell of a career you have had. Obviously, I mentioned the Oakland Raiders there, which is a team that I think you've become synonymous with. You had a hell of a career while over there. Multiple Pro Bowls, all team first pro, second team first pro. How would you describe your experience of your time over in Oakland?
I think overall, Garrett, my professional experience in sports was pretty lucrative. I mean, I was able to achieve things that I never thought possible for myself and my family. But more importantly, it was due to football. I was able to come out with a college degree,
Yeah.
a lucrative career, and it's actually aided me in my post career after I hung up my cleats with everything else doing it, being able to have that strong foundation for an education. So overall, I thought football was pretty productive to me, and I was happy that I was able to play.
And obviously, you played in not obviously there, you also played over in Atlanta, two cities, I
Yeah,
say that are very, very good footballing cities.
yeah.
But obviously, we mentioned Oakland and obviously the stadium that they had over there. How did you feel upon their move over to Las Vegas? Obviously, it was an interesting move when they announced it because it was literally taking that fan base over in Oakland was notorious for
Yeah, no
for
doubt,
who
no
they
doubt.
were, and obviously having to travel to Las Vegas. How did you feel
Right.
about that move? And obviously, the stadium over there is fantastic.
Well, I will say this. When I came into the league in 1993, originally drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, number nine overall, in the first round, it wasn't a good spot for me. It wasn't a good landing spot for me. My style of play wasn't necessarily conducted or constructively useful with Atlanta's offense at the time. They ran
Mm,
this type of offense, what we call the run and shoot, which is a very high pace, fast paced passing game
yeah.
where you're dinking and dunking into to little targets as you run around and very little running the football. And so, with that being said, I didn't have a good time when I had my 3 years in Atlanta.
Mm,
Towards the end of my time, my tenure there, I knew that it wasn't going to work for me, and I was looking to make a change and possibly move to another team. So I just told Atlanta straight up, being a restricted free agency after 3 years, like, either trade me or cut me, but I won't play here anymore. And they were able to work out a deal with the Raiders. And I had
yeah.
had a little bit of a history and a relationship with Al Davis at the time, may he rest in peace, the former owner of the Raiders. And he had talked to me about how he was interested in me possibly playing for his club. And they made it happen. They made a small trade, got me over to the Raiders. I stepped on the field in 1996 and played started every game while I was there,
Yeah.
while I was the Raiders for 9 years. So after it was all said and done, I was able to hang up my cleats and walk away with the game, or walk away from the game proud. Left the little things unfinished. Didn't get that Super Bowl win, even though I did play in a Super Bowl. Didn't get that Super Bowl win I wanted to sort of cement my legacy. But it was what it was, and it was a good career, and I'm happy that I was able to do it.
And you mentioned obviously that Super Bowl run and stuff like you had a hell of a team that season with players such as like
Hmm.
Jerry Rice and all that defense. You had players like Rod Woodson, who's actually been on the
Yeah,
show as well. I
right.
actually met him in New Orleans. You had obviously like Rich Gannon,
Yeah,
Tim Brown. You and
yeah.
bearing in mind you also had what I didn't even realize until I started obviously researching you the fact that you had Jim Harbaugh
Oh
on
yeah,
the coaching
yeah.
staff,
On the
and you
staff.
think
Yeah, yeah.
that also on the staff as well, and obviously Bill Callahan, who's an iconic
Hmm.
coaching in the league. How special was that team to be able to get that run going to the Super Bowl, but are not quite winning it?
Well, here's the thing. I will say this: it was a very special team, a very special team, and I think we knew what we had. The year before we went to the Super Bowl, we played in the Tuck Rule game, and that was the last year that John Gruden actually coached our team.
Mm,
Knowing what we had in the locker room, seeing what we had, we fine tuned it, we added a little bit. And some people might say that team that went to the Super Bowl in the following year was better than the team that played in the Tuck Rule game. It's up to interpretation, however you want to look at it, but it is what it is. But we did have a good team. We had a good nucleus and a good locker room. When John Gruden got traded to Tampa Bay, and talking with Mr. Davis at the time, I just said, look, it would be more. I was my suggestion that it would be more beneficial if we hire from within rather than going
Mhm.
to an outside coach and bring it in. Mainly because I know that once a new coach comes in, they're going to want to come in with their own staff and their new
Yeah.
philosophy. Both depending on what side of the ball, both it could be both offensively and defensively. And we had a good thing there going. The year before we went to the Super Bowl, I mean, our quarterback Rich Gannon was winning. The year we was winning awards. The year we went to the Super Bowl, I think Rick that was the year that Rich won the MVP of the league. So I mean,
Hmm.
we were feeling pretty high. If we would have went outside of that coaching spectrum, we might not have achieved that. We might not have gone to the Super Bowl the
Mm.
following year, even though we had a good team. So it was very beneficial for us to hire from within. And once we did, the sky was the limit. The following year, our Super Bowl year, we started off the season, the first month of football, we won all 4 games. And then the next month of football, we lost all 4 games. So at the end of 2 months, we're sitting there pondering what the hell is going on
Yeah.
with our season, what the hell is going on with why we can't win now. But at the heels of that fourth loss, which made us 4-4, we had to take a trip to Denver halfway through the season. Denver had been a team that had been sticking in our crawl for some time. And I'm speaking collectively as a team. I know from
Yeah.
my standpoint, we had trouble beating that team consistently. We could pretty much dominate the division, but it went back and forth at that time with Denver. And these things kind of come in cases where it's in different cases, different years and stuff like that. But those years we were having trouble with Denver. Long story short, if it wasn't for Rod Woodson, who's a really good friend of mine, when we were up in Denver intercepting that long 100-yard interception for a touchdown, I don't know if we would have won that game.
Yeah.
Ever since we did win that game, it really turned our season around. We didn't lose until we got to the Super Bowl. That was the last game we lost that year.
I think the also Super Bowl was there in San Diego, the last one ever in San
That's
Diego,
right.
because obviously there's no team there now, and also the last one ever in January as well, which is a stat that you just you find amazing now because you always associate the Super Bowls with February these days.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
like obviously it's a very interesting last Super Bowl to the end. I know obviously it didn't go your way that year, but obviously having someone like Jim Harbaugh on your staff, did you always know he was going to go on to be the coach that he is nowadays?
No. No, not at all. Not at all. And you know what? Congratulations to Coach Harbaugh. I mean, he's really come long and far when you talk about what he did after he broke away from the Raiders, going into college, what he did at UC San Diego,
Yeah.
moving on to Stanford, obviously coming back to the league, had coaching the 49ers, coaching them to a Super Bowl where they ended up losing to his brother, but still nonetheless getting there.
Yeah.
And then all the success he had at Michigan before he left Michigan, winning a national championship and coming back in the league. I did not know it at the time if he was cut out for it, but I mean, he's part of a long 10-year football history with his family. So I'm not
Yeah.
surprised. Not surprised.
And obviously, we talk about the way the league is nowadays. It has truly become an international league, not just like it was pretty much obviously back then. Obviously, you would have some players from other parts of the world, but primarily it was America players from American colleges. The game is now truly international with not only stars from around the world starting to appear in the NFL, but also games around the world. Is there
Yeah.
anywhere where you wish you'd have been able to play in your time? Do you wish you'd have been able to go to any of these international destinations for these games?
I've since then have kind of traveled around the world and other things. I think it's beautiful. I thought the idea. I played in Mexico and did a game when we commentated a game that we did in Canada, and I saw the fanfare, how it was received worldwide, and more importantly, the games that have been over in London. I've been a part of the team, not necessarily playing, but from a broadcast standpoint, being over and watching it. I would have loved for it to expand to where it is today, or had it been in place back in my day. But the fact is that technology just wouldn't allow it. I
Mm,
remember talking to the former commissioner, he rest in peace, Paul Tagliabue, when I was working for the NFL Network after I hung up my cleats. I went into television and radio right after in 2004. And I remember talking with Paul Tagliabue, the commissioner at the NFL at the time, and he was talking about the possibility of promoting and doing things internationally. And the first thing I said to him, technology has got to be better because
yeah.
you can't put guys on a flight for 14, 16, 18 hours and expect them to turn out well and on the other side. You know what I mean? They've got to get
Yeah.
enough rest. So you got to come up with a plan. And that's why, what Roger Goodell and the NFL did when they started having games over in London, it was a popular thought in the industry that eventually there's going to be a team in London because that's the new stomping ground. It's for an international flavor on a consistent basis for the NFL. They've already maximized everything they can do in the country, in this country. There's really nothing else that they can do that hasn't been done. Moving a team from one place to another really won't generate the type of income the NFL wants to
Yeah.
see and is expecting to see. So their next best bet is to go over to London. Eventually, they'll move it to Japan. Australia might be a little bit of a stretch, but the international flavor I think is coming in more than one way pretty soon.
Well, it's interesting because even to this day, the record attendances for Jacksonville Jaguars games are all the
Yeah,
games over in the UK. And obviously, that
yeah,
does help the stadium being obviously bigger
yeah,
Wembley in
yeah.
comparison to what they have over there. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens when they go for that renovation, whether they will increase the number of games they spend in London when they're going for the stadium expansion. So it would be interesting to see whether they are going to go, say, from 2 games in London, which they have been doing the last few years, where they go for 4 games as the Jaguars, and then the rest of them over in somewhere else in the state of Florida. So it is going to be interesting to see what that happens in that space. As you
Well,
mentioned, the
Garrett, I would
Australia.
challenge you this. I didn't want to cut you off, but I would to say this, and you can bet, mark my words. The NFL is pushing to have at least 12 to 14 games over in London.
Yeah,
Now, I say that to say this. Um, Khan, who owns the Jaguars, also owns the Tottenham Spurs English Premier League football team over there in England. And so that's the reason why Tottenham Stadium was built. Whether they take it to Wembley or Tottenham, they are going to be able to have the ability to have a venue to where they can have American football games. The NFL wants to have international games. They want to have that ability to where they can have, and it doesn't have to be the Jaguars, it could be anyone. They want to have that. They're expanding upon it. That's why you've seen in recent years the increase of international games between London
mm,
and Germany. There is a big draw in Europe for American style football. The problem is a lot of the general public just doesn't understand it. Once you get them exposed to it or see it more so, and they're able to catch on, then people will start adapting it. And if they go so far as to have it offered in schools, I know the coaches when Mexico was on the horizon for possibly being a place for the NFL to land. I know that Mexico reached out to former coaches,
mm,
American football coaches in the states, for them to come down and teach football. So they're
mm.
trying to catch up, and now the rest of the world is doing just that. China, Japan, New Zealand, Australia, everyone's kind of catching up with the American football buzz and starting to incorporate it. So it's just a matter of time. Now the technology and the travel has gotten a little bit better for it. It's just a matter of time before you see more and more international games throughout the NFL season.
And it's interesting, well, because a lot of the teams that are doing a lot of flag football over here, all the ones who
Yeah,
have the international markets over
yeah.
here, which obviously with it becoming an Olympic sport, obviously that's another opportunity for people. So I wonder what your thoughts are of the fact that with it becoming an Olympic sport, flag football, on how that can potentially develop and grow the game internationally.
Football is a great game. I've always had the utmost respect for it. American football is just a tremendous game because it's one of the toughest games because it works off of chemistry. It stems off of chemistry. Your ability to play next to the person next to you, and when you think about 11 people at any given time having to focus and function as one, that's the challenge that stems from American football. So it is what it is.
Yeah,
Much to your point, I love the game of football in any capacity, whether it's touch football, flag football, tackle football, whatever. The game is beautiful and it teaches you so much. Flag football is nothing more than a glorified 7-on-7 drill, 7-on-7 drill to me, which is, just pass ball defense,
yeah,
scoring touchdowns. It's a fast paced game that anybody can pick up. You really don't have to be that skilled in the art of American football. All you need to know is if you're on defense, see flag, get flag. If you're on
yeah.
offense, run around, get open, and try to get in touchdown. I mean, that's what you're pushing it as. So I think flag football, any capacity, any type of football is promising and special to me in my heart.
And obviously, obviously as a sport as well, it's interesting the growth of the game in regards to taking players from other sports. For example, Jordan Mailata, I think is probably one of the
Yeah,
biggest success stories right now, taken from rugby league in Australia
certainly.
to become probably one of the best played offensive
Yeah,
linemen in the game. Not bad for a
agree,
seventh round pick, that isn't it?
agree.
But you do wonder, obviously, because I'll be honest, as someone who's played rugby myself, I thought coming towards a retirement on rugby, I'll give American football a go. How hard could it be? what a mistake that was. I literally went and did O-line, and literally I didn't realize that training was 2 hours of basically me just going from squats. Like,
Yes.
and the next day not being able to walk downstairs because I've
Right.
been doing squat thrusts for 2 hours constant in in pass protection drills and
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't have to give me a whole new respect for what you guys have to do on that O line, I tell you.
Right.
But it was that's the thing. Do you think that obviously for the international players to become more and more do we need a skills position, or do you think we're okay getting by with our offensive line, defensive linemen making it from the international scene?
You know what? Here's the thing. When you talk about the future of the sport, the way I've always looked at it with any sport, how does it draw to the younger generation? Because that's the generation that's directly behind us or coming up now is the one that's going to be playing the game.
Yeah.
Football, especially, doesn't matter what level you're talking about, is a young person's game. It's not for the older people. It's not for the older geriatrics. It's not for them. No, because you get broken up and get beat up very easily. It is for the younger generation. So, with that being said, focus on the younger generation. How do you market it to them? I think the NFL has done a tremendous job. When you look at the Super Bowl run, the amount of flag football commercials you saw, and what
Mm,
did they do more than anything in those flag football commercials? They showcased women, young
yeah.
girls. Now, this comes out twofold, psychologically. It comes out one, if a mother sees a little girl playing football or her little girl likes flag football, you're pretty much putting at the back of your mind the possibility of concussions, the
Mm,
possibility of severe injuries, which kind of plagued football for a little bit of the moment following the concussion lawsuit, if that makes sense.
yeah.
So parents were really, bothered about putting their kids into football. A lot more pulled them out and took them away from the great game that we regard. But now you
Mm,
think about it, if you market it, you have young girls who are running around who are being stars, whether they're playing quarterback, receiver, or whatever, playing flag football, then a parent is less likely to say, you know
mm,
what, that might be too dangerous for my son. If I let my daughter play, why don't I let my son play? Then you incorporate the entire family. Does that make
yeah.
sense?
It
So
does, and I think
so
it's
that's why it's important to notice these little nuances of what they take when they're marketing.
It's also interesting as well. Obviously, it's becoming more of a game, I think, for the whole family. You're seeing a lot more families at some of these games, like, for example, the
Yeah,
London games. And obviously, I
yeah,
know that's a little bit of the Taylor Swift effect. There's going to be those
yeah.
fans that come in as a result of Taylor Swift,
Right.
but you are seeing more and more families at these games. It's interesting to see how that develops, and obviously trying to get fans of the whole demographic, not just targeting at the what you call the guys in the tailgate
Yeah, yeah.
with the beers, which don't get me wrong, that side of the game, very much a fan of myself. But it's interesting that how it grows to that side to be more of a family atmosphere,
Yeah,
what that generates. Because obviously, if you get a family in, that's not just one person ticket, that's potentially four-person ticket, which is four persons drinks, food, and all the rest of it. So it's the merchandise that goes on top of it. It's all the little add-on expenses. It's very smart when you consider it from a money-making, revenue-generating activity to incorporate not just one guy, bring his wife, his daughter,
yeah.
his son.
Agree. Agree. Agree.
uh, so we also talk about obviously going back to your careers that you've been inducted to two Hall of Fames, the College Hall of Fame and the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame. Both of those
Yeah.
out. How when you heard you were into both of those Hall of Fames, how did that make you feel?
Very surprised and stunned. I mean, I never played the game for accolades or hoping that I would get accolades, but to be honored with some things that are so prestigious, whether it's the Rose Bowl Hall of Fame, which marks the granddaddy of them all. I had the privilege of playing in three of them during my college career, which was very special. I ended up winning a national championship after my second Rose Bowl appearance. And then the College Football Hall of Fame, which is even more special because when you think about American football, you think about
Mm,
the different levels, Division One, Two, and Three, and then of course the ones that aren't assigned. How many people played this game over since
yeah.
the history of football started? And you talk about a small percentage, like myself, who got their names inducted into the Collegiate Hall of Fame, which is very special, and it's a very high honor that I hold in dear regard.
And obviously, the college game, I think, is something that you start to see grow a bit more over here in regards to the viewership of it. I think
Right.
Sky Sports have recently took over the rights over the last couple of years following the fall away of the ESPN player
Hmm.
internationally.
Hmm.
So it's interesting, obviously, to see because I think what thing that's always fascinated us Brits in regards to the international, the college game is watching 110,000 people watching Georgia and Bama, watching in
Yeah.
effect university athletes,
Yeah.
which like those kind of things just feel surreal to us, and yet the impact these colleges have on those local areas. Obviously, you went over to Washington and played for the Huskies, which again is a very prestigious college. Do you want to talk about your at college and like just that college experience? Because at the end of the day, it's not you're not just a professional, you're not an athlete in effect. You're also there to get an education. Like, how do you balance those two?
I went to the University of Washington in 19 and graduated high school in 1988. I went with the only thing I wanted to achieve was getting a college degree. I
Yeah.
graduated high school at a very young age. I graduated high school at 16. And initially, my mom did not want to let me go to college because one, I was going to go away, and two, I was going to be on my own. She did not let me go. So I held out for a little bit. I stayed home for a little bit, took some extracurricular courses, and didn't go up until I was at least 6 months later, before I started at Washington. But I went with the objective of getting an education. That's why I went to school. First one in my family to go to college. I told
Mm,
my mom, if you let me go, I will come back with a degree. I won't come home until I have one. And that's what I did. I had
nice.
no idea, no ambitions, no sort of wherewithal that I would go into the National Football League. But I do know this. After winning the national championship in my junior year, and I was asked, it was projected that I would be able to go into the National Football League and get drafted. I could not leave at that time as a junior because I didn't have my degree, and I made my mom a
Mm.
promise, and so I had to, stand for that promise, and I didn't leave until I had the degree because I knew that after it was over, I wasn't going to come back.
Yeah, no, love that fair that you went on to get the degree. 'Cause at the end of the day, I think it's the good thing about American football, particularly with these scholarship programs that you
Yeah,
have over there. It's chance for people who, because obviously we think at university is expensive over in
yeah,
the UK,
yeah, yeah,
but in
yeah, yeah,
comparison to what it costs
yeah,
over in the
certainly,
States, it's a whole nother world.
yeah,
So it's giving those potential people from those backgrounds that might not ever get a chance to get a degree
right.
those opportunities. And don't get me wrong, there are people who don't go on to complete the degree because they they they
For
they
whatever reason, yeah,
they,
everyone's different. Yeah,
they see the first round draft pick potentially. I'd be the first round draft pick in the quarterback selected. Do you know what I mean,
yeah.
but for those people who, because not every player gets to go to play in the NFL like yourself.
No, 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 I agree.
There's
Yeah,
for every player like yourself who gets to play in the NFL, there's 150 to 200, 300 players in your
certainly,
position
certainly.
who their sole goal is to get that degree. So it is good in effect how that works, and it is a
Hmm.
system that is good to get those education through
Hmm.
for those people who might not ever have those opportunities otherwise. So it's great to see. I'd
Yeah.
be remiss if I didn't talk about obviously the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to call them Las Vegas now because that's where they are.
Absolutely.
They have. They did not have a good season last year.
Right.
As a former Raider, what do they need to do to turn that franchise around?
First of all, they got to get a quarterback. They got to get a quarterback
Yep.
that can extend the play with his legs. Today's college game has evolved in a sense to where you don't have stationary quarterbacks that just stand in the pocket and throw.
No.
Not to say that not impossible to win with it. I mean, Jared Goff and Matthew Stafford, two successful quarterbacks in the National Football League currently that aren't necessarily what I would say mobile or going to be moving around a lot. But you got to have a quarterback who can extend the play with his legs. More importantly, and the most important thing for the Raiders, they've got to get their offensive line fixed.
Mm,
Their offensive line has not been good over the last couple of years, has not been consistently good over the last couple of years. I've seen flashes and moments, but you're
mhm.
not going to be able to do anything if you don't have a good offensive line. So they need to commit resources this year to getting their offensive line intact and keeping them together.
I think when you look at, for example, the Philadelphia Eagles, a classic case, you look at their offensive line, how much of that they've drafted, and how many those draft picks have been first, second, third rounds, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. It does shows that if you are investing in that O line properly, you can go on and do really, really well, which is good to see. Um, obviously you've been on to have a media career as well. Obviously, you mentioned you worked for Fox and all the, and also saw you worked for NASCAR. How did that come about? Because obviously NASCAR, football, two very different
Yeah.
sports.
Very true, very true, very true. So I didn't actually work for NASCAR when I was in radio with Fox Sports Radio, and we had a weekend show. There was an event they sent me on assignment to where I went to Fontana Racecourse outside of Los Angeles and was able to watch a NASCAR race. That's really the only time that I've been doing anything with NASCAR, other than just casually reporting on it. But actually being at a race and seeing it firsthand, that's where I was doing it at a NASCAR event.
That's, it's pretty cool. Obviously, it's an interesting sport. Obviously, I've never been able to see live myself, and that's
Yeah.
what I saw. I was like, so cool. So obviously, what are you doing with yourself these days? Obviously, what is it you're doing with yourself these days now?
Okay, broadcasting. I still have the broadcasting, and so I'm the color commentator for the Las Vegas Raiders radio network, along with Jason Horowitz. We call all the Raiders games, so we travel around with the team that way. Also do college football with the Big Ten Network and various other entities, but I'm kind of taking a step back from that because my son is playing high school football, so I need to keep my Friday nights free
Yeah,
now for the next couple of years until he's off to college. But for the most part, that's what I have. I own two restaurants. I own one here in Phoenix where I live. I make home. Also own one outside of Vegas in a suburb called Henderson. I'm working on a couple other restaurants around the country, but a part of the franchise, the Angry Crab Shacks, are what the name of the franchises that we have. And it's a seafood boil, Cajun seafood boil.
yeah.
So we're
Love
doing
those kind of
that.
places. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna lie.
we're, do- we're doing that, and other than that, being a full-time dad, raising, I've
Yeah.
got a son in college at UNLV, a freshman in college, and I've got a sophomore who's in high school here. So other than that, just doing the best I can.
No, obviously, truly great for your time today. Absolutely honoured to speak to yourself. Obviously, the career you've had has been absolutely stellar, and obviously, so glad to be able to get you on and have a chat with yourself today.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it, and good luck to you in your future.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Obviously, thank you very
Thanks,
much
brother.
at home for watching, and we're back again with another very special guest.